The night it happened, rain slid down the diner windows in crooked silver lines, blurring the neon sign outside until the word "Eat" looked like it was melting into the dark. Inside, the place was nearly empty, just the low hum of a tired refrigerator, the clink of cutlery from the kitchen, and the steady hiss of coffee being poured into chipped mugs. That's when a single dad janitor pushing a wobbling mop bucket through the door froze mid-step, stared across the room, and quietly said the words that would change both their lives. "You're coming with me." If that line already has your heart racing, stay till the end, because what unfolds next isn't just about courage or kindness. It's about how two broken worlds collide in one small, forgotten diner, and how everything changes after that. His name was Daniel Reyes. 42 years old, janitor by title, father by destiny. The night shift clung to him like a second skin. Schools, offices, old government buildings that smelled of paper, dust, and regret. His hands were rough from years of cleaning other people's messes, and his knees ached in ways the weather always predicted faster than the news ever could. But his eyes were soft. The kind of eyes that had learned to brace for disappointment but still held on to hope for the sake of someone smaller than himself. That someone was his daughter, Sophia. 9 years old, bright as a spark. She had sleeping problems ever since her mother passed 2 years earlier. Nightmares, sudden panics, the kind of grief that doesn't follow adult rules. Daniel worked nights so he could be home when she woke up for school, make her breakfast, walk her to the bus stop, kiss her forehead, and promise her, every single morning, that he'd be there when she got back. That evening, Sophia had begged him to bring her something sweet. "Just one pie, Dad. Apple, please." He smiled and promised he would. So he stopped at the diner after his shift. Same one he always went to. Cheap, quiet, safe. At least, it always had been. Until he saw her. She sat alone in a corner booth, back straight, shoulders squared like invisible epaulettes still rested there. Her uniform was gone, replaced by a simple civilian coat, but her presence filled the room anyway. Short silver hair, eyes sharp even in exhaustion. A woman used to command, now trying to disappear into a lukewarm cup of coffee. The waitress avoided her without knowing why, the way people sometimes instinctively dodge gravity. Daniel stopped walking, because he knew that face. Not from TV, not from newspapers, from war, from a time he never talked about. Admiral Eleanor Graves, 5-star Navy Admiral, Strategic Command, the woman whose voice once crackled through his radio on a night that never ended. The woman who gave an order that saved his unit, and another that buried 2 of them. She was supposed to be untouchable, surrounded by escorts, protected like national treasure. But tonight, she was shaking. Her hands trembled as she lifted the mug. Her eyes darted toward every opening door. Fear didn't suit her, but it owned her completely. And Daniel felt it in his bones. He didn't think. He didn't hesitate. He walked straight up to her table, water dripping from his mop handle onto the floor, his reflection warped in every shiny surface around him, and said softly but firmly, "You're coming with me." Her reaction was instant. She half stood, instinctively ready to strike or flee. "Do you know who I am?" He nodded once. "Yeah, that's why you're not staying here. What authority do you think you have to? Enough to know when someone's about to die if they stay where they are." That stopped her. Fear flickered in her eyes, not of him, of something else. "Sit," he said gently, "and listen. You've got about 30 seconds before whoever's following you realizes you didn't order food." She searched his face. Years of command taught her to measure risk, to weigh lies, to read intent. What she saw was exhaustion, honesty, and a kind of protective rage she had seen before, only in soldiers with nothing left to lose. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. "Because once," he said quietly, "you helped me walk out alive." Her breath hitched, and then she slid out of the booth. Daniel didn't lead her to a hidden car or some heroic escape route. He took her to his home. A tiny, second-floor apartment with a flickering hallway light and stairs that groaned with every step. He locked the door behind them, checked the windows, pulled down the blinds, and handed her a glass of water like he'd done it 100 times before with strangers who didn't know how close they were to the edge. "This is where you're hiding?" she asked, stunned. "This is where I live," he replied. In the bedroom, Sophia slept curled around a stuffed bear, breathing slow and steady. Admiral Graves stared at the sleeping child as if seeing something holy. You brought me into your daughter's home. Daniel's voice was steady. Because this is the only place I know that hasn't failed me yet. For the first time in decades, she didn't have an answer. The truth came out in pieces that night. The scandal, the evidence she'd turned in, the people who didn't want it seen, the security detail she no longer trusted, the reason she'd run instead of calling for backup, because the threat was inside the chain of command. I didn't think I'd survive the night, she admitted quietly. You weren't supposed to, Daniel said. At dawn, the knock came. 3 sharp raps. Daniel moved without sound, every old instinct screaming awake inside his muscles. He peered through the crack in the door. 2 men. Dark coats. Government eyes. He didn't open it. This won't end well for you, one of them called. Daniel stood up straight. It already didn't. For you. What they didn't know is that while they'd been hunting Eleanor Graves, she had been transmitting quietly from the old laptop Daniel used for cartoon movies and homework assignments. Files. Proof. Recorded orders. Financial trails. Names. By the time the door splintered inward, sirens were already climbing the street like a rising tide. The men ran. They didn't get far. By afternoon, the news exploded everywhere. A high-ranking conspiracy exposed. Admirals arrested. Careers destroyed. Secrets dragged into daylight. And through it all, one question echoed across every screen. Who saved Admiral Eleanor Graves? The answer didn't come that day. Or the next. Daniel returned to work, mopped floors, emptied bins, walked Sophia to school, bought her apple pie. Life didn't suddenly become bright and easy. But something had shifted. Weeks later, a black car waited outside his building. Daniel stood between it and his daughter without thinking. Admiral Graves stepped out alone. No uniform. Just a woman. She held out a small box. Inside, a medal Daniel had never expected to see again. A commendation he'd been denied years earlier. And a second envelope. Your daughter's education, she said. Fully funded. As long as she wants to learn. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. I didn't do this for money. I know, she said. That's why you deserve it. Sophia ran up and hugged her like she'd always known her. That night, Daniel looked out at the city from his tiny balcony, the noise of the world floating up around him. He had saved an admiral. Without a weapon, without a rank, just a janitor, and a promise to a little girl. And somewhere in that moment, he finally believed what Sophia told him every morning. My dad is a hero. If this story moved you, if it made your heart beat just a little faster or reminded you that ordinary people can still change the world, don't just scroll away. Like this video. Subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be the one that changes your life.